Blanche and Emil Bowe going into the DOJ as number 2 and number 3. Now, I want to keep that in mind as we're going through this, because when they use a word like obstruction, when they say Alvin Bragg might be obstructing, that carries a little extra oomph to it, since they're going to be, running the Department of Justice in like a month. It's going to be great. So we're going to see what they are intimating as this goes forward, courtesy of President Trump's defense team. They write, all right, Judge. President Trump is here, replying to support our motion to dismiss this entire case. And their original filing said, we want this case dismissed immediately. And Alvin Bragg came back, well, how could you say immediately? How could you say that? And Trump is saying, we are demanding it immediately, reiterating their demands. Here's how they start. All right, Judge Merchan and Alvin Bragg. President Donald Trump respectfully submits this reply. This is the final word. So it was Trump's original motion. He moves first. Alvin Bragg moves second. Trump hits the final reply. In further support of our motion to dismiss the indictment and to vacate those jury verdicts that were verdicts of guilty. And we're responding to Bragg's filing that we read earlier this week.
Mostly, not much work to do tomorrow. It's mostly driving stuff. I got to go to Defiance first and then head out to Pittsburgh. I don't think I got the word. I don't know if I'll be able to hook up with Dirty or not, but I got to get it done tomorrow.
On True Social with the following comment. Fetterman's on Truth. It was his first one. John Fetterman went over to True Social and he said, here's my first truth right here. He said the Trump hush money and Hunter Biden cases were both BS, and pardons are appropriate. Weaponizing the judiciary for blatant partisan gain diminishes the collective faith in our institutions and sows further division. Now, as to President Trump, Fetterman's summary of Alvin Bragg's behavior is apt. So Trump's people don't know in Hunter's case. They don't care what his position is on Hunter. They have no skin in that game. So, all right, call David Weiss, Biden's own DOJ, I guess you can call Biden's own prosecutors BS. All right, whatever. Fine, whatever. But what he's saying, as Senator is saying, Alvin Bragg.
Yeah, I hope so too, but
he's weaponizing.
I get it.
In the Trump prosecution.
This is the last time I'm out that way.
Whatever. It's the false business.
Yeah, there's already ice on the river. The Maumee River. Yeah, got ice on it.
So Alvin Bragg's brief includes a request that the court disregard the New York Court of Appeals and fabricate this unconstitutional abatement law. Remember? We were making the distinction. Trump is saying this case must be dismissed. Dismiss versus terminate. Trump wants it dismissed. Alvin Bragg wants it terminated. He actually wants it sentenced. Can't get that. His backup plan B was how many cases Trump's not dead, but our ambitions are dead.
Okay, that dude just went right through the red light.
Dead, so we can pretend he's dead. So
wow.
He's probably dead. So just make it terminated. They say, what the heck is that? You're going to fabricate this unconstitutional nonsense? You even admit it, that it's not constitutional. There's no law there that allows you. He admitted it when we read it earlier in the prior motion. This is all based on an extremely troubling and an irresponsible analogy between President Trump, they're going there, let's do it, who has survived multiple assassination attempts, and you're trying to make an analogy that this is like a case where somebody just drops dead? Irresponsible Alvin. You should know better than this.
Almost had the guy in front of me going through it too. He was like, wait a minute.
A branch of government.
Fucking moron.
Fucking moron.
Fucking moron.
And a hypothetical dead defendant is who you're
Right next to
comparing
him
him
now.
to?
Oh, that's a
Now that unhinged
either a company vehicle or
contention,
something. It
Alvin,
has a number on it,
demonstrates
864.
conclusively
No plate.
Alvin Bragg is a sick person, and the district of attorney.
Oh, looks like it's got a template in the
Attorney's Office
window.
of New York cannot be entrusted to separate their political motivations and their career ambitions from their obligations to seek justice. Now,
we're gonna get
Bragg
funny?
has no credibility.
Hit the brakes for that green light?
in these
Okay.
proceedings at all, and they must be terminated immediately to prevent additional constitutional and legal.
Yeah, fleet car.
violations.
Yeah.
Trump's defense continues.
Brand new fleet car.
Deputy AG Alvin Bragg, Associate AG Leopold Cunley.
Wish I knew what company it was.
Send
Send him a little clip.
dismissal is
Saying, yeah,
necessary.
look.
And it needs to happen now. As president-elect and the soon-to-be president, judge, there can be no further criminal proceedings against President Trump at all. Such proceedings interfere with the ongoing transition
on,
process
get over
and
it.
preparations that are
That lane
necessary for
disappears.
President Trump to effectively carry out constitutionally designated functions. Therefore, under the Presidential Transition Act, immediate dismissal and a vacature of the jury verdicts are necessary.
Yeah.
So just strip
I wouldn't
those up
snitch.
like Nancy Pelosi in Congress with those official records.
Unless he harmed me in some way, I wouldn't do
Alvin
it.
Bragg
But
did not
still,
address a single word of the Act's text when he went through his little whiny response previously. Since 1963,
stop at the
Congress has prohibited
local grocery store,
any
get a couple adult beverages and
process
a hunk of meat for me to cook
in
tonight.
order to avoid the harm of the safety and well-being
Yeah, she's
of
coming.
the United States. During a
She will be
period
coming
when the
along with me
president-elect is
tomorrow.
arguably making more fateful decisions than he will have to make after his sworn into office.
We'll do a nice long drive stream. We'll probably use the regular channel tomorrow
Record when they were having these conversations back in 1963. Now the transition
until it
Act
crashes anyway.
reinforces the doctrine of sitting president immunity because, as the law clearly says, the president-elect's transition activities are integral and
Midwest should be on the air pretty soon. He's having some issues with his load, but
It's like that whole sequence in Rocky, man. There's a lot happening. There was
He's got it
flooding all over the
resolved.
place, trucks running up and down stairs. DA Bragg's obstruction of this congressionally mandated federal function, and see that word there, ding, ding, ding. Alvin Bragg's obstruction. Oh,
she has every time we've gone.
she is obstruction, isn't she?
She's gone with me 90% of the time I've gone out there.
And you know what else he feels?
Been out there about a dozen times. She's probably been out there 10 times with me.
It might
I think I've
also
only
be
gone out there twice by myself.
interference. And it might be interference with something like the peaceful transfer of power. Yes! Eureka! Obstruction and interference happening right now with the peaceful transition of power by the Democrats. Let's see where it's going. And that obstruction impedes upon the federal
As long as you ain't fighting.
and it imposes dangers of intrusions.
But
on
we got
the
no reason to be
authority and
fighting.
the
Although
functions
anytime we have
of
fought,
the
it's been
executive
for
branch.
stupid shit.
That Trump is preparing to assume on January 20th. President Trump's extensive transition activities, which are happening right now, for example, are choosing his cabinet, meeting with world leaders, preparing day one executive orders, and other policies. These are all integral to the official conduct as president. Now, Congress and the Office of Legal Counsel and all other reasonable sources recognize that these are all consuming tasks that are necessary during the short transition period, and that these undertakings are critical to the national interest and our national security.
Yeah, I saw the little video he
And Bragg's
posted.
conclusory assertions to the
Right,
contrary
on Telegram, anyway.
transgress Article 2 of the Act, and
Oh no, he might have sent it to you too.
and they are inciting. Now, Alvin Bragg's feigned ignorance of the Supremacy Clause demonstrates the importance of the constitutional restriction on biased, incompetent prosecutors. Now, Alvin Bragg purports to be confused. I don't know how this works. about the operation of the supremacy clause in this setting. He says, well, it seems that President Trump's position
figured he
appears
did.
to be based on...
Because he actually said those words on the video, so...
Confused, Alvin?
So
Here,
I
let me
figured
explain
you'd
this.
seen it.
Alvin Bragg's mischaracterization does not reflect the law. Let me educate you. The supremacy clause is a key part of the basis for applying presidential immunity to prevent these improper local proceedings from interfering with the sanctity of the electoral process and the functioning of Trump's executive branch. Federalism and comity support the same result, right? Miss Comity, where does this friendship between... We're in the same country. Okay?
Yeah, I saw that, like, pulled right in front of him. There's no way he could get out.
They're also friends. Now, since at least 1879, courts have repeatedly refused to let biased state prosecutors like Alvin Bragg and Fannie Willis and Tish interfere with federal officials and their official functions. In Vance, a Supreme Court case that worked its way up through the Second Circuit and the DOJ emphasized these concerns as particularly forceful when we're talking about the presidency. And even Alvin Bragg recognized that the operation of the supremacy clause, he wrote, was, quote, very analogous to the separation of powers problems that arise in federal immunity cases. So we do have to protect the presidency against certain impediments, right? He was recognizing that because in his filing that we talked about previously, he agrees while you are the sitting president, you can't prosecute him, right? Because of the impediments and the shackles that it puts on the executive. Now, Trump cited the same authorities back in July.
Definitely stay off the road for that shit.
When he submitted a motion to dismiss to you.
My brother almost got killed in an ice storm one time.
That motion,
bad
when
accident.
Alvin was responding back then, he didn't suggest any confusion. So now all of a sudden he's confused. He doesn't know how this works. Now he disregarded nearly all the same cases that he already referenced, wrongly mischaracterized the arguments as relating to, quote, intergovernmental immunity, and relied principally on tax burden case law that is not even cited in Trump's motion to address their straw man. This is good stuff, man. So you created a bunch of things that we never talked about, right? In other words, you said Trump is pulling on intergovernmental immunity. It appears Trump's talking about intergovernmental immunity. No. Maybe that this is a tax burden case law. We're going to cite these cases. We're not talking about taxes either. We referenced the Presidential Transition Act, which you didn't reference.
Yeah, you're going to have some power outages.
We talked about the supremacy clause.
That stuff gets so heavy on the power lines.
And these other cases that are just not part of your analysis.
Power lines, cable lines.
Do not be misled by this weak parlor trick from
trees.
Even on Bragg's own terms, it would, quote, directly obstruct the activities of the federal government. He wrote in his filings for this court or for his own office to impose restrictions on President Trump. He admitted it. Then now he's confused. Now the prohibited obstruction, there it is again, resulting from these local proceedings.
One more week of shortening days.
Includes any type of sentence as well as a continuation of the gag order.
Oh, that sucks.
Because Trump is having his rights now limited.
You got plenty of blankets?
He can't speak about this judge and this judge's daughter and their Democratic alliances and how the judge made donations to Joe Biden and to
so your landlord needs to inspect that generator then.
Didn't like Trump's tweets when he was the president, and how the daughter made millions of dollars for the company when she was fundraising off of the prosecution that her daddy was operating in New York. He can't talk about any. So if he is being gagged and silenced during this process, his actions are being interfered with. Some might even say
2 sleeping bags.
That's right. And that violates President Trump's extraordinary power under the Constitution to speak to us. Now, presidential immunity, as we know, categorically forecloses further proceedings here, Judge. Alvin Bragg conflated distinct strands of presidential immunity upon you in an error that pervades their entire brief.
Yeah,
Alvin
but you need to make sure you have power.
forms of presidential immunity because he can't keep it straight. current and former presidents,
Especially if they have
are
backup system
immune from
available.
prosecutions that are based on or involve evidence relating to their official acts. And remember, this Trump prosecution allegedly involved payments to Stormy Daniels. It did involve payments that were allegedly to her. They say it was to her. He says they were not. They were to his lawyer and Michael Cohen, the perjurer, was paying off a porn star for whatever reason. And they were blaming Trump for a mislabeling of something that were made. All of it was done by Trump's hands, largely from the White House during his time as president. So you at least have to have a debate about that. Was that signing of that check, that specific check, was that an official act? Could you make an argument? His lawyers for his personal stuff.
It's a lot
So
shallower
in those
here.
three
That's
buckets
why.
that the Supreme Court delineated for us, you got to decide, where do those fall? Maybe they're unofficial. We've never had the conversation, so you can't just presume and decide, no, they're all unofficial.
Oh, shit. I'm tired.
Now, Alvin violated this form of immunity in grand jury proceedings and again in trial. And in addition to that, and distinct from this is official act immunity, sitting presidents are absolutely immune from all phases of criminal
I like black and tans, but I'm not a huge fan of stouts. I can, oh, fuck. Damn, that's my dash cam.
It stops. Thus,
So
for
what?
purposes of this motion, Alvin Bragg's false claim
Yeah, like I said, I like a black and tan from time to time, but, you know, or a Guinness on St. Patrick's Day, but too hot or too cold, sometimes that suction cup loses its suction. I just put it back up, but I don't know if it's centered right now.
So once he won, this whole distinction went bye-bye. Doesn't matter. Okay, he's the president.
Porter, it's, you know, it's more of a wine, but I love mead. I've made mead before. I love mead.
Guilty verdicts and dismissing this case.
I mean, a real mead, not like honey wine, which is what mead is, but mead is a lot stronger. It's more like a liqueur. That is a good view.
Which is rhetorically chilling, but wholly unjustified.
Yeah, I love mead.
No one's above the law. Clearly, the Democrats have a bunch of people that are.
There's a few meaderies around here. There's so many. There's a lot of beef farms, you know, honey farms around here.
The federal Constitution, which guarantees
A lot of clover
presidential
fields and stuff.
is the supreme law. So, abiding to that.
Quite a few places that make mead.
So we're actually following the main law, not Alvin Bragg's hack.
The wife likes hard cider. I'm not a huge fan. I don't dislike it. It's just I'd rather have a beer, an IPA.
Alvin Bragg cannot impede President Trump's sweeping powers and duties, accounting for that reality and ensuring that the president may exercise those powers
Hey,
as
Brandon.
the voters anticipated doesn't place him above the law at all. It preserves the basic structure of the Constitution from which the law derives. Alvin is the one acting out of constitutional order, not Trump. And even Jack Smith agrees with this. Alvy, the DOJ dismissed it. Well, we'll read this and we have our.
I'll leave this playing for you guys. I'm gonna run in and grab a steak to cook and a couple 6-packs for me and the wife.
Todd Blanche, Emil Bowe, writing for President Trump continued. They say, listen, Judgment Call, get out. Let's be real. All right.
Yeah, lager's not bad.
Jack Smith,
Pilsner's
even
fine,
he
too.
is not a real prosecutor.
Like the old-fashioned ones,
Even
like
he dismissed it.
Coors Banquet or something like that.
Application of a categorical bar on criminal proceedings against Trump. Nothing in their submission from the feds
Really?
suggested that Bragg's
Boy, that's
about procedural and substantive
down to the minute.
Bragg's
Okay. It's 100. What is 127 hours? Is that like 5 days?
In Jack's dismissal, said, well, we
5 days?
This if we only had these differences. Bragg now seeks to distance themselves from Jack. Jack's running away, but he wants to distance themselves from Jack. They've got us reading parties right now on the rest of these books. Everybody wants to distance themselves. And And they're still trying to distinguish between official and unofficial acts. Okay, well, Bragg argues that Jack's prosecution was based on Trump's affinity to their grand jury evidence and testimony. There are two official government witnesses who worked for Trump.
5 days in a wake-up, we used to call it.
This contention overlooks the fact that Smith recently devoted 165 whiny pages to arguing that his D.C. prosecution was not based on official acts either, right? It was so not based on official acts that he spent 165 pages explaining why it wasn't based on official acts. What do you need a full book for to explain it, Jack? I mean, if it's not based on official acts, what's all this explaining? Oh, it's clearly on official acts, clearly based on it. Because it's your second draft, mind you. Remember, he had the first indictment, which was filled with official acts, like Trump talked to his attorney general. Trump talked to the DOD. You're like, hello, he's the president. Weirdos, he's allowed to do that. Then they stripped it all out. And they still were having him talk to Mike Pence, and that was part of it. And then they had to do a second draft of the indictment, refile a superseding indictment, and then they're arguing on that. No, but that's still okay, too. So they're just calling him out. It's great. Although Trump disputes Smith's arguments, the salient point is that the DOJ's dismissal was not based on concession of official act immunity. No,
wait 3 years.
Saying the prohibition on this is categorical. It doesn't hinge on whether it's official or not official. It's categorical and doesn't turn on the gravity of the crimes charged or the strength of the government's proof or the merits of the prosecution. The people vetoed you. The Constitution requires this case be dismissed.
Yeah, a lot of places it's just, oh, Jesus.
That's what Jack Smith said, okay? The DOJ interprets it this way. So, Judge, you better get on board with that interpretation because the federal government says that. Don't come back and say, well, this is different because it involves Stormy Daniels and Cohen and personal payments to a personal lawyer. No, doesn't matter. Trump's arguments relating to the supposedly temporary nature of, Bragg's arguments relating to the temporary nature of Trump's immunity does not support a different disposition. Regardless of whether the immunity is temporary, the DOJ and the Office of Legal Counsel have rightly recognized that Trump's immunity currently applies to him now. It precludes ongoing criminal proceedings, and it requires a dismissal. They said the proper balance supports recognition of temporary immunity while the president remains in office.
Yeah, this is for my dash cam, though, so it's weird. All right, I'll be right back. I'm gonna leave the car on so it's warm. I'll be right back. No law against that here.
The required vacature and dismissal are not unduly prejudicial to any valid interest of Bragg. Okay, they failed to timely achieve their political desired result. They initiated this lawfare campaign 6 years ago, and this was based on record entries that harmed nor deceived anyone. All standard stuff. And so Bragg, he has to be bound by their concessions in another case. Now, in addition to the force of DOJ's conclusions about Jack Smith's case, Bragg is bound by their previous concessions. In another case, Bragg conceded that there were two distinct forms of presidential immunity that are relevant to this case. Bragg said this: "We're mindful that as a state actor, as a prosecutor, our office cannot investigate a president for any official acts, and that we cannot prosecute a president while in office." They wrote that a while ago. That's what the DOJ said. And they've been saying that since 1973. Thus, the posture of this case is not any different. They made that case up to the Supreme Court when they were filing their petitions there. He also acknowledged that courts are empowered to shut litigation down where cases have real burdens on the presidency. That's what's happening now. This year, the Supreme Court issued a binding decision concluding these burdens are unconstitutional. And so, sorry, Judge Merchan, Your Honor, you must now do what even Alvin Bragg conceded when he was filing his positions during the appeal. And you see how they're flip-flopping? This is what's been so fun on this case, is they haven't had a safe position. Remember that Jack Smith kind of wanted to leapfrog the Court of Appeals to get that decision on his case rendered quickly, and then the Supreme Court kind of backhanded him and slapped him back down. Everybody's filing, just saying whatever they could to get the outcome they wanted. Now they're switching their position because Trump won. And they're just calling them out, saying, well, you wrote in your other motion that you can't do this. Now you're saying you can? Alvin Bragg conceded that Trump has immunity. He said it. And his opinions were well-founded and inescapable back then. Sitting president immunity requires Trump not to be subjected to any criminal proceedings, right? And their arguments, like they were conceding part of it. They're like, well, when he becomes president, then we have to stop. But he's not president, so this is the line. So, well, now the line has been crossed. He won, so now what? Got to eat those words. So their prohibition is categorical. The Constitution does not permit a, quote, practical inquiry into what Bragg says will happen after the presidency or happen during the term. Bragg lacks any qualifications to even make a guess. The court cannot put the country at risk based on Alvin Bragg's jaded crystal ball as Bragg looks ahead to his next election. Now, the OLC has come with a categorical rule consistent with the Constitution that doing a criminal process and proceeding here is perilous. Now, when the Supreme Court has engaged in balancing to weigh presidential immunity versus public interest and more, it has done so based on the type of proceeding at issue, but not the case-specific posture. So it didn't really matter where we were in the case. It was the type of proceeding. Doesn't matter if we're early in the case or late in the case. Fitzgerald was at an advanced stage. There were 4,000 pages of testimony. In other words, it doesn't matter that we're just like 1 inch away from a sentencing. Okay, Bragg's like, we're so freaking close, man. Just let us sentence him, please. It doesn't matter. Too late. Vance was based on 200 years of precedent about subpoenas and other things, and so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where we're at. It hasn't happened, and now you're done. Finally, as with other opinions and other courts' reasonings about Trump's immunity, this decision is based on institutional considerations, not timing considerations, and so it is a categorical bar. Now, Alvin Bragg went through, and in his filing, he said this is not going to be that big of a deal on Trump. So one of the reasons we don't want this to happen is because we don't want prosecutors to burden the presidency, as we've been reading. Alvin said, well, it's not going to be that big of a burden. Let's just say we're not going to put him in jail, and that'll be good enough. Then he won't have to worry about it. And if he's not worrying about jail, then it's not really a burden, and so we can continue on and come back with sentencing after the presidency is over. But they say that's ridiculous. That's not a minimization of the burden. Trump's immunity and the corresponding prohibition on any criminal proceedings targeting a sitting president is based on 3 burdens: sentencing threats like going to jail, a stigma, and distraction from official duties. And could you imagine if we just had to deal with Khan sitting there like, I wonder what Trump is doing today. I can't wait to see him 4 years from now when he comes back to my courtroom. And Alvin Bragg and all of them well, we're going to pick this back up, hanging it over his head for 4 years, having to deal with this crap? No. Bragg gives impermissible short shrift to each. Okay, this is a big burden. First, Bragg carefully avoided acknowledging that Trump cannot be sentenced right now. He can't even admit it. It is clear that incarceration is out of the question. So don't even think about it, Judge. It's out of the question. Nor may Your Honor impose any restrictions or disqualifications that would apply during Trump's second term. Even potential criminal liability are unacceptable. Nor can New York impose any form of probation on Trump, which would also cause unconstitutional burdens arising from liberty restrictions, the threat of revocation and further probation violations, which are new criminal charges, and associated penalties with that. So you cannot even penalize him. And second, Alvin is wrong that the only relevant stigma that results from the, quote, initiation of criminal proceedings matters. Well, everybody already knows he's been charged, so like it's not going to get any worse for him, and already been found guilty. So it's only from the start. Since this is a continuation, it's not a problem, which is so idiotic. It's like, okay, really? Then dismiss it, right? Because you've already accomplished your goal. You just initiated it. So whatever happens at the outcome doesn't matter, right? Because the stigma's already attached, moron. There is a peculiar public opprobrium that attaches to criminal proceedings at every stage. Yes, at every stage. Bragg's post-trial emphasis is on irrelevant and disputed allegations, like in the Bergdorf case with E. Jean Carroll, who says she got Bergdorf in a dressing room at Bergdorf's. It helps to illustrate why that is so. It's also obvious, as the Office of Legal Counsel says, that stigma arises not only from an indictment, but also from the need to respond to those charges throughout the process. Now, Bragg will undoubtedly amplify the stigma arising from these proceedings. If Bragg is allowed to just pause the prosecution and bring it back, he's going to make it a point every day as he's running for re-election to say, you know, as soon as Trump leaves, we're going to prosecute him again, and I need to be the guy to be here to do that. There's a serious stigma here. And if he can do that, that's going to seriously interfere with Trump's presidency. And third, Alvin improperly, Alvin says, well, we can just come back for sentencing as soon as the presidency's over, because we need to continue fighting these. And he says there's no burdens that are going to need to fight these, because it's basically over. They say, what? No. Every point of every criminal case requires every defendant's personal time and mental preoccupation. Yeah, Trump is choosing to continue to fight this. So saying, well, Trump can choose just not to fight it and worry about it and just bend over and take it. No, they say Trump is going to fight it. He does choose to fight this on every single front, Alvin, until your pathetic display is put to an end. It is Trump's constitutional right to do so at each step along the way by fully participating in his defense, as he has from the outset. Now, Alvin makes a peculiar constitutional argument by suggesting that the president's ability to do his job should not be disrupted because Trump could just waive his constitutional rights and just go and plead guilty. Now, the Constitution should not lightly be read to put its chief executive officer on such a notice and such choice. And that stage, the advanced stage of this case, heightens and does not diminish the risk of interfering with his role. Just because we're almost close to the end doesn't mean anything. In fact, you get more tense. You're going to be sentenced. It's like, you're going to go to jail? What? Bragg's claim that a defendant likely feels greater apprehension about the future actions of a prosecutor than during subsequent stages is indicative of their complete lack of awareness about the catastrophic and historic failure of their weaponization of the justice system. The irresponsible and at times unethical behavior by Alvin Bragg and his underlings has only increased over time. No participant in the defense against this unprecedented abuse of criminal justice system is less concerned today than we were a year ago. To the contrary, it is abundantly clear at this point that Alvin will say and do anything, including urging the court to disregard the Constitution, the New York Court of Appeals, and the Second Circuit to try to make this abomination stick. The threat of a potentially imminent sentencing in front of psycho Judge McCann, my words, increases the need to devote attention and urgency to each motion that is necessary to further demonstrate how lawless these proceedings have been since the inception. That threat enhances the risk of distraction from the president's duties, which are of unrivaled gravity and breadth. Now, Bragg's arguments to the contrary diminish the crucial role that a defendant plays in the design and the presentation of his own defense, and they disrespect the criminal justice system that Bragg has failed to protect. defense continues, writing, Alvin Bragg's politically motivated interests don't override presidential immunity. Saying his interest, which is like, we have to just maintain the jury's verdict as a notch in whatever belt he plans to wear for his campaigning in 2025, is no basis to interfere with the executive branch. Bragg quotes a Bond versus U.S. case, saying that, quote, traditional state authority includes punishment.
Should have wore the furry hat inside, man. It's cold.
Well, suffice it to say that dating back to 2018, this case has been anything but traditional, Alvin. Trump's motion does not require the court to assume that Congress has meant to effect a significant change here between federal and state jurisdiction. Nobody, neither Congress nor the Supreme Court, has ever tolerated disruption of the executive branch in favor of a local prosecution. Never happened. Here's cases that show that. Likewise, the Second Circuit also denied Alvin Bragg's request that federal courts abstain from the dispute in a subpoena in advance. And so thus, even if Alvin had proceeded in a matter with the public interest in fair and effective law enforcement, which he hasn't, that consideration would not justify casting aside immunity.
Yeah, we got the goods.
Which is designed to protect the presidency.
Got me a hunk of meat.
The balance of competing interests.
They mistagged a ribeye as a chuck eye. So I got a $20 ribeye for $7.
They continue telling us that Alvin's little accommodations. Remember Alvin was like,
Yeah, they don't want me going through the village. There must be some kind of thing going on in the village. So I'm gonna make a little loopy loop here.
if you don't like that, how about we just pretend like Trump is
Come in the
dead,
back way.
and then we can just terminate the case because there's
Ah,
that
jeez.
allows us to do that in New York unless he's
I'm gonna
dead.
have to figure this
Just
out,
pretend
man.
he's
This
dead.
is pissing me off.
So they say, look, these accommodations are unconstitutional and totally lawless. Bragg's so-called accommodations, anything short of a dismissal of this case, are a strained effort to position their zombie case like some...
Yeah, they had a couple of other ones mismarked there too. I almost bought them all, but I'll let somebody else get over on that deal. They were right mixed in with the ribeyes too, so it's not like they were in the wrong spot.
This zombie case must be put to rest. The zombie case, which started in 2018 and it involves decades-old false allegations, cannot simply be stayed until Trump leaves office.
Fucking
The presidency. It would give New York County
home repairs and shit like that, I fucking suck, man.
which exists
I'll
for the
admit it.
protection of the entire nation. Not to be worried about what
Well, that
Judge
sky looks
McConnell
nice,
thinks
too.
about Trump's foreign policy. Alvin and the court have asserted wrongly and without any evidentiary foundation that their gag order is still necessary too, insurrecting Trump's free speech as the president-elect of the country, not a private citizen anymore. Continuation of that unconstitutional prior restraint during the course of this hypothetical stay would result in this court and Bragg policing Trump's constitutionally protected speech, authorized by the Constitution, on threat of mid-presidency imprisonment and other unconstitutional penalties as well. Now, in addition, if we just pause this, it would require President Trump to lead the country while facing the ongoing threat that this court and this Democrat-donating judge are prepared to impose imprisonment, fines, and other punishment the moment he leaves office. Now, to be clear, President Trump will never deviate from the public interest in response to these thuggish tactics. However, the threat itself is unconstitutional. In other words, Trump doesn't buckle or bend to any threats, doesn't even think about it. But the fact that there is a threat alone, though it doesn't impact him at all in any way, shape, or form at all, period, it's unconstitutional by virtue of its existence. Under the Presidential Transition Act, under the Presidential Immunity Doctrine, and the Supremacy
Your body's not able to do it, you shouldn't do it.
And the distractions and the burdens above. And so, for all these reasons, Bragg's accommodations of staying in the case until Trump leaves has no legal basis and is completely unacceptable. Now let's talk about their little fantasy land Now, here's Bragg's dark dream scenario. Why don't we just pretend Trump is a dead man and use abatement by death? It's not an option, Alvin. Nice try. As a further illustration of Alvin's desperation to avoid legally mandated dismissal as required under the law, Bragg proposes that you, Judge Merchan, pretend, just make believe, as if one of the assassination attempts against President Trump had in fact been successful. Bragg also thinks, he says, quote, it makes sense
Bow's
for Your
live.
Honor to pretend that the court is in
Watch
Alabama
a little Bow tonight after I
too.
get home. I haven't seen him live in a
These
while.
abatement arguments are absurd. This court is bound by the existing case law surrounding abatement. In New York and at least 13 other states and federal courts, abatement is effectuated through the remedy that President Trump seeks. The indictment must be dismissed. That's how it works. This isn't Alabama. Apparently feeling unburdened by what has been, apparently feeling unburdened by what has been in New York's Court of Appeals, Alvin Bragg asks Your Honor to make new law contrary to binding precedent. Oh my gosh. Judge Merchan just flipped over his whole friggin' table. He's reading this. He's already hot. He's flying all over the place. Judge effing this Liz Cheney by what has been.
He doesn't DJ anymore, but he works the...
Senators that have departed from this practice have expressed concern about the impacts of abatement ab initio on victims' rights. What happens if we just terminate? What happens to victims? Here, however, it is not seriously disputed that there are no victims to even be concerned about. Worse still, in Alvin Bragg's abatement wonderland fairyland, the proceedings would not be subject to appellate review because whatever's happening can happen. Who cares? It's Alvin's land. Welcome. Next stop, Tishville. Incredible. And so, wrongly suggesting that appellate proceedings could merely be held in abeyance. They're making it like hurt so bad. Merely. What do you mean merely? What does that mean? Is there like a standard in there just because you think it's merely holding the whole case in abeyance? Like not a big deal for you? Thus, Bragg has casually suggested that the court enter an order that violates President Trump's quote.
Yeah, my son that does the wildfire firefighting, he does that in the winter a lot.
Expect more from a first-year law student, Matthew
Okay,
Colangelo.
good because he's asking for money
And
today.
this is yet another indication that Bragg's opposition to this motion has not been undertaken in good faith. Now, the court cannot resolve this motion by violating President Trump's sentencing rights, so don't even think about it. Now, Alvin also asks Your Honor to impose, quote, certain limitations on a hypothetical sentencing that they're thinking of, that the court lacks authority to conduct. This judge has to be so bad, I can't even imagine how bad it is. By this page, by this point, and I really like how Todd and Emil have done this, they're warming it up. So now we get to the point about sentencing, and he's saying, by the way, you can't even do it.
Yeah, it's what you do with it, though, and I don't think he's doing the right stuff with
Talk
it.
about like this fantasy, but Judge, you're done too. So we'll continue.
Once again, he's promised to come see us on
No, you can't
Sunday. We'll see.
The proposal
I'd like to have him around for the Lions game. That would be cool.
There is no basis for any court,
But, you know.
this one Democrat dono judge, to disregard the significance of President Trump's extraordinary leadership as a public servant. The fact that there can be no sentencing is a fact in order here, where President Trump's service to the American people would be a significant mitigating consideration. Now, furthermore, and particularly in light of the existing evidence of bias, conflicts, and the appearances of impropriety, it does not blunt President Trump's concerns.
Yeah, I did too.
To suggest that the court simply disregard Trump's second term in office.
I did too, and actually, it proceeded on to my young adulthood, so. Or younger adulthood, anyway.
An implicit bias to President Trump at a future sentence
All a long story.
threatens the
That's not me anymore. All right, guys, I'll see you later. Probably, like I said, we'll probably be live tomorrow for the drive. Be a nice 5-hour drive because I got to go an hour west first, and then we'll probably go live from there. All right, guys, love you. Have a great night. I'll probably be in Val's stream later.